We're pleased to have Julian Bucknall here from DevExpress. He's the CTO and an experienced senior architect and developer. DevExpress has been around a while. They are no flash in the pan. So they've been doing something right for quite some time. And they are entering into the HTML5 space. They have a lot of experience with developer tools, and as we all know, developer tools are one of the areas in HTML5 that we like to see mature and see some definite winners in, because whenever I talk to people, one of the things that they ask me is, hey, where's the full tool chain? So we're happy to have Julian here to chat about that and ask him some questions about mobile websites and mobile apps.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Great. So, Julian, where do you see responsive layouts taking over, and do you think that the writing's on the wall, that they're good enough to eventually just take over from what we've done in the past, which is writing different separate desktop and mobile sites?
It's a tough question. I kind of go up and down on this. In one sense, using a responsive layout is great because you essentially write your web page once using some kind of cues from whatever framework you're using to actually display your content in certain panels that can then be moved around as the end user either shrinks or grows the browser window or uses a tablet or other mobile device or phone or whatever. But the thing I find is that even with responsive layouts, it's one of those things where if you pay attention to a particular format of screen, so let's say a phone screen, and you write for that particular format, you can get a better result, I find, than maybe just using a responsive framework. When you move from a phone to a tablet, the tablet, you generally have two ways of looking at the screen. You can either portrait or landscape. Phone, people tend to use it in more of a portrait mode for, say, websites and so on and so forth. And I think, although the responsive frameworks are ridiculously good, I'm not trying to denigrate them in any sense or shape or form, but I think still there is a need, if you like, to design your website for a particular screen size, and I don't think that's going to go away. And the other thing about screens, it's not necessarily just the screens, but it's also the user interface. What the end user likes to do with his tablet or his phone is used to swiping from side to side on a phone, for example, or clicking a list which then slides to the side to show more information about that particular item on the list, and so on and so forth. So responsive is a great first step, I think, but I think still website designers still need to consider the devices they're trying to target, or the end users whose devices they're trying to target.
Okay, so in your opinion then, what would be the right process if somebody, now we are of course talking about more polished designs, because the more you start designing for a specific platform, the more polish you're putting in, and for some
Right.
people in the enterprise, or even if you've got a small business, probably it's a bit much to design for both. But let's assume you want to go for that polish. You're a medium-sized business, and you've got enough resources to polish it up. How would you suggest people approach that? Because obviously you're saying no, one size doesn't fit all if you're talking about more of a polish.
Exactly. I'd say that for internal apps or internal sites or what have you, then the responsive framework would be the way to go. I mean, you just basically think in a particular way for your design, and it would look good on any size device. Now, obviously, if you're say a news site and you want to have your end users having a good um, experience with your website on whatever device they're using, then it makes sense to design your website in several different ways according to the device. So for a phone, for example, if you want your end users, your public, to read your news site well and have an interesting display and a kind of very functional display for the device that looks like almost it was written as a native application for that device, for example, then you've just got to bite the bullet and design. There's no two ways around it, I'd say.
So with HTML5, you're saying, in that case, you can have HTML5 as your code base, but you've got to have several designs on top of that.
I really do think so, yes.
Okay. Right now, with HTML5 single-page apps, there's a lot of discussion on when you should go for native and when the single-page app works, and what criteria in your mind should be considered for choosing the path on where you take to your new app.
The mobile space is just, it's exploded over the past year, maybe even 2 years. The number of ways you can create an application for something to run on some mobile device has grown extraordinarily. It's no longer just HTML or Objective-C, for example. It's there's a company out there called Xamarin, which we're very interested in because they do it in .NET. There are other companies that allow you to create applications and then compile it into, say, Objective-C. PhoneGap is kind of in the middle, so it knows a lot about HTML and JavaScript and is able to produce native applications without actually going into the Objective-C or Java space. And but the biggest issue is possibly with PhoneGap is the fact that these devices are very much more locked down than say normal PCs or Macs or whatever you have. You can't do a lot of things in the browser. As you probably well know, you can't access the camera, you can't access contact lists in the browser, things like that. You always have to produce a dialogue asking the user to have permission to do these things. And PhoneGap, with its plugin system, tries to get around that by compiling certain bits natively and then having the HTML and JavaScript. And it's getting there. There are issues still with PhoneGap. It's fairly easy to write some kind of application in HTML5 and JavaScript, and then you have certain issues which you have to try and solve within PhoneGap as you compile it for a native application. So it's in the middle, yes, but I think there's still some way to go, and I think it's only going to really succeed as if the manufacturers, so Apple or Google, embrace PhoneGap in some sense and provide better plugins or provide better APIs, native APIs that PhoneGap can use for these kinds of applications. But it's kind of nice. You write some web code, you can put it on a URL or you can compile it. That's kind of fancy. If somebody said to me, really need a native app and PhoneGap is just not quite there, do we need to write it in Objective-C or something else? I'll look at Objective-C and go, well, yes.
What's DevExpress's approach right now? How are you architecting this? Because you are an architect.
Right. So DevExpress, we've been around 15 years. And we've traditionally targeted the Microsoft.NET space. So we write user interface controls for the .NET space, be it WPF or Windows 8 or things like ASP.NET and so on and so forth. So that's our traditional space. Now with ASP.NET, you're doing half server-side things and half client-side things. And so over the past year or so, we've started to concentrate a lot more on the client side in the as what happens in the browser, with a new framework which we've called PhoneJS. PhoneJS is a framework for creating single-page applications. In other words, you navigate to one URL, and then the application takes over, the framework takes over, and then presents a series of views to the user without having to navigate back and forth between URLs. So, we'll display a list, and you can navigate from the list to a pane which shows information about the item on the list, just as an example, or you have a display of a map, for example. So this is all covered by PhoneJS. We have a bunch of widgets and so on. Writing that kind of web application is nice, but then people say, well, it already looks like an Android app. Why can't I put it in the Google Play Store? Mm-hmm. Or it looks like an iPhone app. Why can't I put it in the Apple App Store? And so we use, we show people how to use PhoneGap to compile their web applications then into a native application using PhoneGap, and show them along the way how to use PhoneGap to access things like the GPS or the camera or whatever native things there are on the phone or tablet. So that's our approach. Is we're doing the HTML5 JavaScript widgets in a nice framework that changes itself according to the device it's being run on, and then we show how to use PhoneGap to then compile that into something that can go into whatever app store that you need to submit it to.
Well, thank you so much. We've been speaking with Julian Bucknall, and CTO of DevExpress, who makes PhoneJS. So especially if you're looking at single-page applications, you should definitely look them up and look at the approach. We're obviously dealing with people that have good sophistication, have been there a long time, and are fairly honest about where we are not trying to oversell. I think that's very refreshing. Highly recommend everyone looking at PhoneJS, and we hope to be talking with you some more, Julian. And thank you so much for sharing some of your day.
And thank you for having me. And thank you everyone for listening in.